Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of my show. Good evening. It is Friday, the 17th of April, and I am going to discuss some images that we've been seeing over the last day, summary of the news, and obviously the big story here is the coronavirus ongoing epidemic. Now, I think in these particular images we get some ideas of what brings us together during this crisis, and possibly in some instances of where we're not all together fully. But I'm going to start with what I think has been quite a big image shared on social media and on the news channels today, and this is the Health Secretary, who's effectively standing in for the Prime Minister in making a lot of television appearances. Matt Hancock, and particularly this artwork behind him, which you can see, which is a circular image showing the Queen. So it's quite a weird visual. And what on earth does this say? It's obviously quite trad to have an image of the Queen, but it's certainly not a standard sort of government portrait that you might have. It's kind of techie, it looks quite modern, perhaps there's a kind of attempt to say that this government is both rooted in some tradition but also in tune with science and progress and all this other stuff. So obviously that got a lot of people talking and like, what on earth is that thing? And it turns out that this is a painting that was donated to the government by Damien Hirst, and you can see it a bit clearer here. It's a spin painting, which is a technique he uses to create these. I suppose Damien Hirst isn't really the most exciting artist right now in British art, but certainly has been in the past, certainly a very enterprising fellow, and you can understand why the UK government collection would have a piece of art by him. Get the impression that possibly the Health Secretary was just searching the catalogue for a portrait of the Queen, knew that Damien Hirst was a bit famous and then picked it. Maybe he didn't actually see the thing, but it's quite flattering. Obviously the Queen smiling, and it creates this quite unique image of the government as being a bit dynamic. If you think this is Damien Hirst, this is what he looks like. He's famous for his shark in a vitrine. He's probably quite he's probably quite a pleasant man to meet. I think there was maybe a time when he was thought of as an outrageous person. I'm sure he's just like any other art collector and maker. This is his amazing art gallery in South London. He's commissioned Crusoe St John architects to make this, and it won the Sterling Prize. So clearly he's a patron of art. So I think that was one of the things that caught people's attention this morning. It was certainly shared on the BBC News television channel quite a lot. The other thing is something which actually comes from last night. So last night we had the clap for carers, where across the country people were clapping to show their appreciation for the NHS. And there was a kind of media stunt where on the Westminster Bridge, which is obviously a super prominent central London location, right next to the Houses of Parliament, also right next to St Thomas's Hospital, where they're treating coronavirus patients. A bunch of police officers, which seemed like a huge number of them with vehicles, made a kind of spectacle there. And there's a bit of video which I'm going to show now, which has caught some attention. So effectively in this, what you can see is police cars on the bridge with their sirens, lights flashing, and a lot of people. And there's a lot of people just hanging around clapping, and obviously looking quite happy. It's great, it's really good to be out there and enjoying yourselves. But obviously this doesn't quite suit the sort of image of what we're supposed to be doing right now, staying 2 meters apart from each other. And certainly when you read about police officers sort of confronting people for sunbathing in a park, for example, and then you see police officers standing like this and the sort of public there, then you think maybe this doesn't quite show a consistency in approach. Now, in reality, in some ways what they're doing here is totally harmless. It's quite conceivable that nobody in this shot has always capable of spreading coronavirus, and it could be that in a few weeks or months we're back in a scenario where we're able to sort of gather and congregate in this way. So I don't think people should be too alarmist about seeing visuals like this. But in the same way, I think there is a kind of feeling at the moment that we're all in this together. Certainly where we are here in Tooting, everybody's doing their very best to follow the instructions. So I suppose there's a sort of feeling that you don't want to feel like you're stuck at home going to the shop, being very careful not to go near anyone, and then there's a kind of another segment of society where they're able just to sort of go along and party and live like everything's normal. Clearly that isn't happening in this shot, and I think it's really unfortunate, and I think that it's just one of those things that you can expect to happen in a scenario like this. But certainly it hasn't helped that there's, for example, in this image here shows some of the leaders of the police force in London. So it's pretty clear that this wasn't a bunch of officers just creating a visual stunt for the fun of it. I mean, they were all there, and even here you can see a lady with her phone wearing a mask who looks like a pedestrian in the background, who's possibly trying to get across the bridge, and looks like she's going to have to squeeze through this gap between the other people. So it's not very nice, because she could be a at-risk person, and she's got her mask on, other people don't. So it's pretty weird optically, and it's certainly been massively discussed on social media, but not really been a visual or a thing that's been discussed on the television news today, which in some ways is understandable. But yeah, it certainly, I think, does sort of raise some questions about the consistency across all levels of society, and where visually where we can see that we're all in this together. And certainly for this week, what I think was one of the very most powerful images published this week was the front page of the Daily Mirror, which I believe this is Thursday's issue of the paper. And what this has is effectively, these are images of NHS workers who have died from this disease. And these are people who died most likely because they caught this thing while they were working, and they were working in an environment where they were putting themselves at risk of catching it. And this is you cannot be underestimated how powerful this image is, because these are people who are obviously heroic people, and also the tragic victims of this horrible disease, because as you can see, they look absolutely lovely, very happy, smiling, kind, caring, talented, passionate people. And the NHS, having worked in the NHS myself, I can certainly say from my experience of working in it, is full of people like this who are the best people you could ever possibly hope to meet. And sadly, there probably will be more people like this who will catch this disease and get ill, and some of them will die as well. And I think it does raise this question about the sort of sacrifice, I think is a way to describe it, that people are making, that it would appear some groups in society, certainly a lot of jobs in NHS are quite badly paid, hospital portering, some of the nursing work, it can be quite badly paid, and people can be really exposed to just risks generally. Even before this crisis, it was a difficult job, difficult environment to work in, and this has really heightened it. So I think when you see this image, you realise how important the people are who are in this situation, and also why it's so important to recognise and to continue doing the clap for carers, despite any kind of silly visuals that might appear of people on a bridge, to keep doing that every week, and also to remember that we will get through this, but we have to remember those people, and also do everything we can now, in the future and forever, to make sure nobody working in any job like this is in an unnecessary risk here or in any industry really. It's unacceptable, and with the right safeguards in place, everything can be done to help people. So so I think what I presented here this evening is some different visuals. I think they sort of weave together a story which show how we are together. There's times when we're not entirely together. I think Matt Hancock's painting is an attempt for him to sort of reconcile different intellectual and aesthetic factions within the viewership, but we'll see how that goes, and we'll see what visuals come up in the coming days. So thanks for listening again, and be back soon. Okay, goodbye.